Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Namaste. Sorry we've been off the last few weeks there. Had a great party out there in Montreal. Thank you to everyone who showed up to the party. And I know I didn't have time for a lot of people. I was running around with my head cut off for a lot of that night, making sure everything ran smoothly. But it turned out to be a great night. So today we are joined all the way from UK with a very cool picture right behind him, Mr. Tim Henley. Come on down, buddy.
How are you doing? I wish I could have been at the party. It looked a stonker there, young man. It looked a stonker. So I hope you had fun. The lady behind me, she is my queen. She is your queen. She allows cannabis use in Canada. She doesn't allow it in the UK. She's a fine lady. Not yet, indeed. We're working on it.
So, Tim, we've been tasked with building out the UK now that legalization is potentially coming for medical. So where's the UK at right now with all that?
Okay, so where it's at is that we had a new Home Secretary in place, Sajid Javid, and he took a fresh look. What happened were there were two medical cases that came to the fore. They were young children that were suffering from epilepsy, and the only condition that they could, the only treatment they could find for their condition that really worked was an extraction of cannabis, which they sourced actually from Canada, surprisingly enough. So there's a big up for Canada. However, when they bought it, well, one particular person bought it back through UK customs at Heathrow Airport, and the Border Force seized the shipment of cannabis oil. Subsequent to that, the young lad had a relapse, had to go into hospital. There was a publicity campaign, and effectively Sajid Javid said that they would look at medical cannabis. Now, this is the first time this had happened in the UK, really. I will show you my very proud letter from my MP. You will notice the Queen's Royal Assent here from Parliament, telling me that cannabis has no medicinal use whatsoever. And this is dated the 4th of April 2018. So we have moved a long way forward since then. The current state of play is that the government have convened a task force to look at this. The chief medical officer has written an analysis of where cannabis is useful and where it is not. And I have to say, it is an interesting document. The document actually specifies there is no evidential base for cannabis being effective in epilepsy. Yet it says there is evidence for cannabis being effective in chronic pain. So you can square those two things. The reason I got into the cannabis industry was because there was some research going on into CBD and its use in epilepsy, which was sponsored by GW Pharma, and the PhD actually proved causal effect, that it was a useful tool in the arsenal against epilepsy. So I live it. Sorry?
Who is GW Pharma?
GW Pharma is the people behind Sativex and Epidiolex, the two licensed medicines that are cannabis-based. They are a UK company, by the way. That is why the UK is the biggest exporter of cannabis in the world, according to the UN. Yet it is illegal here.
Do you guys export it to which countries?
We export it primarily to... to be honest, I'm not sure. We do export it. We grow large amounts of it, but I don't believe we export it. It's processed here. We're going to actually face a position because the committee that is looking at this will almost undoubtedly liberalize the prescribing conditions that you can get treatment for. So you will be able to get, hopefully, prescriptions for chronic pain, for sleep disorders, and you will be able to get cannabis-based medicines. Now, interestingly enough, Jesse, and I value your opinion on this, Canada, what cannabis products are available in Canada at the moment, medicinally?
So medicinally, we are allowed to sell dry flower, oil that is mixed in. So the THC and CBD is mixed in with usually coconut or canola oil, which you can put under your tongue. You can put it on your food, etc. And we also have capsules. So it's pretty much like a gel capsule with cannabis inside of it and CBD. And then there are also some topical rubs that some licensed producers sell. But besides that, so like gummies, edibles, vaporization oil, that will become legal in about 2019. And they're still unsure about, shatter and dabs, whether that's going to become legal recreationally or medical. But right now, so that's what we got legal, buddy. I understand that you believe that dry flower might not become legal in UK, eh?
The UK is very, very concerned about the detrimental effect of cannabis upon the general population. At the same time, this is that the chief medical officer advises that you should not use alcohol for 2 days a week because alcohol is toxic, and they've reduced the number of units that you can drink. So you have this dichotomy where the popular drug that was of choice, alcohol, is on its way out, and the drug that has been censured and prohibited for the last 80 years, in fact, it's 90 years in a few weeks that it has been prohibited here, will be hopefully available on prescription within the next 6 months. And moving forward, I will bet you by 2025 that we will have access to cannabis in a similar way to Canada. Maybe not full recreational, but I don't believe that it's recreational anyway. I think people use it for medicinal uses no matter what. It's just that they may call it recreational use, but it's nutritional as well.
So on that note, when you say people wouldn't usually use it recreationally, would you say that alcohol then could be looked at as something medical? Or
but alcohol, it's really interesting. When I was growing up, there was a picture of a St. Bernard dog with a big barrel of brandy around their neck, and if you went into the Alps and you got lost, this dog would come and find you, and the brandy would resurrect you from the dead. That's all gone now, all gone. And alcohol is if you go into a major town any town in the UK on a Saturday night or a Friday night, you will see what alcohol does to the general population. I have a feeling it may be similar in Canada.
Well, being an ex-prison guard working in the remand center intake department, I got to see a lot of that. And, during that time, I never had a violent incident with anyone who was stoned or using cannabis. So to your point, I agree. How is it over there?
It's interesting. I actually, 2 weeks ago, I was in Scotland, and I was in Edinburgh, and we went to a friend of mine, Jazz, took me to a meeting up there that was trying to work with the Holyrood government, which Scotland has a separate government. It's not quite a federated state system that we have, but there is devolution. So some of the laws, Scotland looks after itself, and the same with Wales to a certain extent. And there's a campaign group, and I've been to lots of these different kind of campaigning arenas where people are advocating that cannabis, our view of how cannabis is used and how we use it has to change. And it was really interesting. There's an organization called LEAP here, which is Law Enforcement Officers Against Prohibition. And he gave a compelling speech about exactly as you have suggested. People that have overindulged in alcohol, they are a nightmare to deal with. There's violence, there's antisocial behavior. And he said that people who have overindulged in cannabis, if you ever do, they either go to sleep or they get the munches, and we have to drop them by a fast food restaurant, give them something to eat. They're fine. Everybody is happy. It's such a difference in the way that people react to these things. And it is really interesting that there is change all across the world. And it's not just Canada's obviously leading the way. And it's really interesting to see
everybody. Canada's winning. Woo!
It's really interesting to watch the children growing up and to teach the mother country how it's all done. That's the way it should be. It's really cool to see it. Yes, but absolutely, Canada's leading the way, but the whole of Europe's following behind you, man. The whole of Europe's following behind you. Whether the USA even get on board, who cares? It doesn't matter. You're a G7 country. You can lead the world.
Well, on that note, man, so obviously UK is legalizing. So where does Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland sit on all that?
Well, now let's talk about Scotland primarily, first of all, because they have the most. Well, there's Northern Ireland and Scotland. Let's leave Northern Ireland aside for a moment. Scotland has the most amount of devolution. However, it does have a drug problem, and it's quite a severe drug problem. And this is why they're rethinking that entire drug strategy and how they deal with these things. And part of that process is reevaluating the role of cannabis in society. I'm not sure whether you get things like spice and these synthetic, they call them synthetic cannabis, but they're nothing like it. They used to be legal in it. Sorry?
It's big in the States. There was like
Is it really?
Yeah, a couple people died from it.
It's the most horrible. I live in a small country town, and my first experience of spice was the most horrendous thing I have ever seen. The people were literally zombified on the street bench, and it just strikes me that these things would not exist if we were allowed legal access to cannabis, because there is no need to go down that road. And this is the whole kind of thrust of the change of policy towards drugs. The war on drugs, as everybody is finally coming to realize, it doesn't work. And you guys are ahead of us on this. I watched, it was really interesting. I watched a debate on one of the news programs here. And I believe he was the head of the Toronto police force, who was saying, all we are doing is trying to reduce harm to young people. That's all we're trying to do. Where my personal opinion is, we're on a crusade for sustainability, because cannabis is one of the things that will help the world get through its current issues on sustainability and climate change. But besides that, it is about harm reduction. It is about getting people to understand that cannabis is not a dangerous thing. Cannabinoids are an absolute must for the future of society, in my opinion.
So how will, like right now, UK includes Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. When Brexit comes, sorry, and I know you're a massive fan of that, how will that affect, importing to UK, exporting to European countries? I got to put it back to Tim. He's got a big smile on his face right now.
Yeah. Well, the deal is, dude, Brexit. What? But I better watch out what I say. 52% voted for it. 48% voted against it. Is it looking like a good decision? Well, the jury's out on that. I have a particular point of view, which actually Brexit will help the cannabis campaign in the UK, because we will be one country then making our own rules in theory, and we will be enabled to change legislation much faster than having to wait for 27 other countries to come with us. So potentially we will sit somewhere between Europe and North America, and we will be in the middle of the Atlantic, and we will take the best of both worlds. And it will kind of be one of these areas whereby as powers are returned back from Europe, this devolution, going back to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, they will get powers devolved back to them. And this is where the whole kind of thing changes. And Wales and Scotland particularly, probably not Northern Ireland, but there is a big campaign in Northern Ireland to change the way that these things are monitored and controlled in Northern Ireland. But Wales and Scotland are much closer to making the changes that are required. So Who knows? At the minute, drug policy is controlled from central UK government. Who knows after Brexit where those rules will change, because there will be a lot of change in the way that the UK is governed.
So one of the things we talked about earlier, how you believe flower might not be legalized in UK. I look at that as more of like a policing standard. So here in Canada, when you take a black market nug and a licensed producer nug, look at them, they both look very similar, hard to differentiate. But if you were to put oil versus black market oil, that's probably a lot easier to control and police. Is that part of the reason, or?
Absolutely, it is this kind of area that if you can grow cannabis, you can't really control. Once it gets into the supply chains, it's the control of the supply chains. That's the concern of the government. It's a legitimate concern. For me, one of the things is black market cannabis. You have no idea how it was raised, how it was grown, the chemicals used upon it. Once you have a structured, regulated environment, you have precise controls. Look at all the product recalls in Colorado because of pesticides. I'm sure the same is true in Canada. And so you get this regulated regime where you know what you're using, what you're consuming, and the advantages of that are no end. Cannabis oils are trickier. They're more difficult. You have to process them. You have to create the oils. And I think that is why the UK government at the moment will go down the route of medicinal products will be focused upon extractions. So they will either be oil-based or they will be exact cannabinoids. Going back to GW Pharma, they have the Sativex has a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD THC. So the original medicine derived from cannabis has that kind of ratio. When you go on the black market, you won't find you don't get anything about the strain of it here. What you find is it is this, and everybody refers to it as skunk. Because skunk has become a demon word in the UK for high THC, no CBD, and it leads to psychotic episodes. However, the evidence for all that is very negligible at best, if not disproven now.
Yeah, you've thrown a lot at us here. So do you believe that it's going to be easy for people to get prescriptions like it is? I don't want to call it easy in Canada, but it's a lot easier than from what you're talking about in UK, how you've only had a few dozen people. Once this new legislation comes in, how difficult do you think it's going to be for people to get prescriptions in the UK?
That's a very interesting question.
Everyone's watching, Tim. Everyone's watching.
I have my fingers crossed that access will be based upon medical need. I can tell you I'm in lots of different communities. I'm an activist for change on so many different levels. And to me, the most important thing is that the pharmaceutical routes do not agree with so many different people. From my own personal experience, people find it incredibly difficult to find sleep. And sleep is so important, being proven to be so important now. And you will find that the pharmaceutical kind of thing is antidepressants or whatever. And without going into too much detail, these stop REM sleep, which is really important for beta amyloid proteins, which are the things that create brain plaque, and brain plaque leads on to Alzheimer's. So we give people these pills. However, just the terpenes that come from cannabis. We talk about cannabinoids, but there is also terpenes and flavonoids. Flavonoids are the things in chocolate. So we have all these different components of cannabis. That's why we shouldn't even talk about cannabis. We should talk about all the different elements inside of it, because there is a veritable cornucopia of different medicines contained inside of that plant that we're only just starting to understand. And the research is only just starting to be done because of the liberation that's gone on, so that research can actually take place now.
Well, here in Canada, we have over 100 licensed producers who are growing or about to be growing cannabis, or have gone through the processes and will eventually get licensed. How many licenses are there currently in UK, and do you anticipate that to go up?
The number of licenses we have here is at the moment 13. Of those 12, I believe. I believe it's only 12. The Home Office are the people who grant the license. We're talking high THC licenses, so you can get a license to grow hemp, which is low THC, and you can get a license to grow high THC cannabis, and you have to document the strains you're using and put all kinds of security protocols in place. There are only 12. 10 of those belong to universities, 1 belongs to GW Pharma, and 1 belongs to another company that are working towards creating a medicine that the NHS will use in a large number of different cases. So potentially there is a game-changing situation happening here. The NHS, for those people who don't know, is a state-funded healthcare system, spends an enormous amount on pharmaceutical drugs, and potentially some of those drugs could be replaced by cannabinoid medicine, where the cost base would be significantly lower. So who knows? Hopefully sanity will break out.
Well, Tim, I've enjoyed having you on. And before we get you to say a final goodbye here, I just want everyone to know that I'll be making the trip over to UK. I'm making this public now, Tim, because he's been...
Hey, cool, dude.
I'll be actually going to live with this guy for 6 months, is it, Tim? Or what do we...
Oh, 6 years, I thought, dude. Until we've got legalization, you're here.
Oh, geez. Sounds like that could be a bit. But I've been, one of my tasks is to help build out the UK platform with Tim here. So we're going to do some face-to-face work there and see what we can do for all of our loyal followers. Tim, do you want to say any final words before we sign off?
I think the final word should be to this good lady here. And she presides over a system whereby if I'm in the UK, I get sent to prison. And if I'm in Canada, she endorses your happy and various uses of cannabis. And come October the 19th, is there a specific time on October the 19th that the legislation's enacted?
It's October 17th, and I'm really hoping it's 420.
That would be awesome. Absolutely. It has to be 420. October the 17th, 420. That's the day then. She'll be there, I'm sure. She'll be ready, ready to go. And if not, she'll send one of the... Yeah, absolutely. She'll send one of the younger royals. Maybe Meghan Markle. She'll come over and see how it goes. She has, let's say, history in this area.
Well, what I promise you, buddy, is October 17th, we'll do a Skype, and
absolutely.
I've been using my, medical cannabis in front of you. Now I'm going to do a little bit of recreational.
Oh, you're such a pal. Thanks so much.
No problem, buddy. Looking out for you. All right, buddy. So thanks for coming on, and I'll see you in about a month or so.
My pleasure, mate. Can't wait. Can't wait. You'll be on CBD only then, by the way, so make sure you're prepared.
For the record, I will not be bringing anything illegal there. Just throwing that out.
Absolutely.
So anyway, guys, thanks for joining. This was Namastation MD. We're going to try to get back on track here every week. And we got a lot of cool things on the go within Namaste Technologies. And thanks to everyone for coming out to the party. And for those people like this guy who missed it, you'll have to come to the next one. All right, guys. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next week there. Namaste.